Welcome back to League of Their Own. I am your host, Mia Sansanelli, and joining me again is my dad, Frank. Thank you for being here. Week 12 of the NFL season starts this Thursday with the annual triple header on Thanksgiving, which means we're getting very close to playoffs. Every division is still up for grabs, and with 3 wildcard teams this year, only the top seed in each the NFC and AFC will get a bye week. After what we saw this week, we decided to dedicate this episode to discussing the injuries of major players throughout the 2020 season and how it will affect the playoff picture. Starting with quarterbacks, we have some very notable ones, especially the one that happened tragically yesterday, Joe Burrow, out for the season. Also notable are Drew Brees, Teddy Bridgewater, Dak Prescott, Gardner Minshew, Sam Darnold, Kyle Allen, Jimmy G, and Tyrod Taylor. What are your thoughts on these quarterbacks?
Well, very sad to see what happened to Joe Burrow. Really a fantastic rookie season. Certainly the Bengals were not going to be threats for a playoff spot, but teams that needed wins were going to have to play the Bengals and earn those wins, which without Joe Burrow might be a little easier to come by. So even when players themselves aren't poised for playoff runs, they can impact the other teams pursuing playoff runs. But if I had to pinpoint a couple of quarterbacks that have had the biggest impact on the potential playoff teams, Dak Prescott definitely is tops on the list, partly for the duration of time that the Cowboys lost him. I mean, they lost him for just about their whole season. Didn't know the NFC East would be up for grabs quite the way that it is, but he was having an historic season, and he was masking a lot of problems on that defense as well. The Cowboys look like they may have righted things a little bit, but I would say Prescott has had the biggest impact, and although it didn't necessarily hurt them yesterday, I think the Saints are going to sorely miss Drew Brees. Taysom Hill, with all due respect, an incredible athlete, maybe an underrated thrower of the ball. Playing the Atlanta Falcons defense probably didn't tell us what we need to know about the impact it's going to have on the Saints. Playing better defenses down the stretch, people game planning for him, giving him looks that he hasn't seen. It's going to be really interesting. I think that's going to hurt them more than people are thinking right now.
Yeah, bringing up some other ones, Jimmy G, went to a Super Bowl last year. They're missing some key defensive players since the start of the season, but I think losing him also kind of set their season up for a downhill run. Tyrod Taylor's, although that was accidental, it really set up Justin Herbert's success in the start of his hopefully very long career.
Yeah, Jimmy G is easy to point to as a scapegoat for the 49ers not winning the Super Bowl last year, but obviously he did an awful lot to get them there, and that offense runs better when he is there. There are a lot of weapons that have been hurt. Kittle comes to mind, obviously Deebo Samuel. Even the talented rookie Ayuk has been on the COVID list on and off. There's an awful lot of ingredients sitting on the sideline. If you want to talk about one team bitten most by the injury bug and across the board, the 49ers lost 3 Pro Bowl defensive linemen, 3 in the first month of the season. Really, I mean, Bosa is an elite player. Solomon Thomas, not the fancy name of Buckner, who they traded away. Dee Ford, who came over from Kansas City to potentially tip the scales in their favor, all gone for the year. But to give Jimmy G some credit, there's a leadership factor as well, and you're seeing that it's not so easy to plug and play. You do need your field general, you do need your leader, and that's something that is underestimated by the general fan.
Going back to Drew Brees, I just think we have to talk about the fact that he fractured, 11 ribs in a game and was still on the sideline, ready to go back in when his team needed him, which is absolutely insane and shows what kind of person, what kind of player Drew Brees is for his team. Hopefully he'll be back. I hope this isn't the last season for him where he has to go out in a way like that.
Yeah, incredible toughness. I mean, when you look at him, he looks like an accountant. He looks like he should be filing tax returns for the players, not leading them in a huddle. But it just shows you can't judge a book by its cover. Anybody who had 11 broken ribs and was walking around, running around, playing, I don't think you've seen the last of him. I do think he's lost a little bit on his fastball. I do think that some of the throws are a challenge for him, but in terms of executing a complex offense, playing exceptional defenses down the stretch, his presence would be needed. I'm not sure what his prognosis is, but he's definitely a big loss.
And talking about Sam Darnold, as a Jets fan, I figured you want to have some thoughts on the transfer of the quarterback position.
Well, it's interesting because I don't know if Sam Darnold was ever really given the surrounding cast to assess his true talent. And I think his inability to stay healthy, in addition to that, has really, slowed the ability to make a long-term assessment on him. But the Jets are going to have to do just that because they're going to have to decide if his rookie contract is his last contract. In all likelihood, they're going to have the top draft pick, and they would be crazy to pass up on Trevor Lawrence. And I think that means Sam Darnold's going to be traded. It'll be interesting to see what his trade value is. They can get a king's ransom for the top overall pick if they do think Darnold is the answer, but I just don't know how you could draw that conclusion. The games that they did win down the stretch last year, they weren't playing great opponents. They weren't really, to me, true measuring sticks. He's an anomaly. I could see him being like Ryan Tannehill, never really having the great opportunity, surfacing later, proving his toughness, proving his leadership ability. To some degree, Drew Brees did the same thing, but I'm not going to put him in Drew Brees' category by any stretch of the imagination. But I think his future with the Jets is over, but I think his future will surface again, maybe along the line, similar to what happened with Tyrod Taylor. People get injured, new people get opportunities. I'm not exactly sure where it's going to be and who it's going to be behind, but I would tell you that I wouldn't be surprised to see Darnold surface somewhere else in a different culture through an injury opportunity and hold the starting job for years in another location.
Shifting focus to running backs, some big ones that come to mind are Saquon Barkley. His ACL, MCL, meniscus out for the season early, really damaged an already pretty weak Giants defense, in my opinion. Christian McCaffrey, it was his knee, now I believe it's his shoulder. Austin Eckler, David Johnson, both on my fantasy team, both causing me problems. And then some other ones like Joe Mixon and DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, well, you mentioned a lot of different people in a lot of different settings. I do think that Saquon and CMC are the two most talented backs in the NFL. I think it's a shame that Barkley hasn't operated in an offense that really highlights that. I would have liked to see Garrett with him for a full season as the OC, but obviously that didn't happen. Interesting what you're seeing in Carolina, and this is kudos to the new coaching staff and the offensive mind they brought in, Joe Brady from LSU. What he did with Clyde in college, he's doing with McCaffrey. And then he loses McCaffrey, and Mike Davis comes off the scrap heap. Even when he was in college, Mike Davis at South Carolina was a traditional I-formation tailback. He wasn't this dual threat superstar that he's turned into in Carolina. So it says a little something about Carolina's system that you can plug and play. Not that Mike Davis is doing what McCaffrey was doing, but it's not too far off. You see when Barkley goes down, nobody resembles him on the Giants. Barkley is a unicorn in his abilities, his physical gifts. I think it's unfortunate he hasn't been able to stay healthy. I think some of that is that he's asked to do a little too much when he was in there. I'm really hoping he comes back healthy. They make a major investment in that O-line. And I do like what Judge is doing. I do think a winning culture is coming back to the New York Giants, and I hope Barkley's a big part of it.
Yeah, I really hope so. I just got my Barkley jersey this past Christmas, and I barely got to wear it while he was on the field. Thinking about Austin Eckler and David Johnson, DeAndre Swift, looks like some of them might be coming back. We never know. Thinking about the running backs and the quarterbacks we've brought up, who do you think, since they've been out, who will be traded or permanently replaced by their backup?
It's a great question. I do think that the David Johnson experiment is going to be a one and done in Houston if they can get anything for him. I think like they moved on from O'Brien, they're going to try to move on from O'Brien's poor trades. Not because they have the heir apparent in-house. No disrespect to Duke Johnson, but he's not a franchise back. But I think the David Johnson experiment is going to be one and done, partly because Houston is underachieved as well, and partly just he's attached to the old regime. Just not a workhorse back, just not the strength to carry that load, and we're seeing it again. Eckler to me is really a wild card in this mix because that offense has become dynamic in Los Angeles. I still call him San Diego in my head, but that offense has become really dynamic without a top level back. When Eckler does come back, that's going to be some unit. I'm not sure they could salvage this season with all the hard luck losses they've had, but they could certainly build from here. So I'm really curious to see him come back. Really curious to see him come back.
Talking about tight ends, Zach Ertz, George Kittle, Greg Olsen, probably the top three that come to mind with Blake Jarwin, O.J. Howard. So my question is, which team took the bigger loss? Was it Zach Ertz with the Eagles, Kittle with the Niners, or Olsen with his new team, the Seahawks?
Yeah, it's definitely Kittle, I believe. I'm not sure it's close, and I'm a big Zach Ertz believer. But Kittle is probably the best blocking tight end in football. For a long time that was Jason Witten, and Jason Witten had many 1,000-yard receiving seasons as he did so, and he'll end up in the Hall of Fame because of it. Kittle's going to go there with him in the tight ends hall, if there is such a thing. If he can play a few more seasons, and really only a few more to get there. People put Kelsey in his category as a receiver, and I'll buy that. But when you add in the ability to block with Kittle, it's changed everything. It's changed San Francisco's ability to run the ball on an elite level. That being said, Zach Ertz is a big loss. What we're seeing is then that in that Doug Peterson offense, Goddard was emerging, and Goddard is thriving now as the tight end one. But even guys like Rodgers that step in and put up numbers, it shows you that some of it is system. But Ertz is a big loss, but I can't put him in the same category as Kittle.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I was able to monitor Ertz's performance mostly because he was on my team, and watching even his numbers when some of the other tight ends got some time, it was pretty clear that they had just as competent tight ends that could replace him. I think Fulghorn is the name of the other one that's getting some time.
Well, Fulgham is a wide receiver. In fairness to Ertz, while he was the tight end one, he didn't have the tight end two with him to keep the defense balanced. He didn't have Fulgham. He didn't have Deshaun Jackson. He didn't have Jalen Reagor. He didn't have Alshon Jeffrey. He was a one-man gang, so I think we don't want to judge Ertz too harshly on this year. For me to put Kittle a couple of notches above him is no disrespect to Ertz. I'd love for him to be my tight end in real life. Don't get me wrong. I just, can't put him in Kittle's category, but I still consider him an elite tight end.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. And I think just bringing up Olsen, I think, everyone loves to see him succeed, man of the year. I think we'll be seeing more of him next season. So maybe he will be a bigger part of the Seahawks defense, even though they're already very stacked. And talking about Deshaun Jackson, who you just brought up, brings us to the wide receivers. One of the people who isn't playing currently, along with Cortland Sutton, OBJ, Julian Edelman, Paris Campbell. What are your thoughts on those players?
Yeah, a good indication of what's happened in the league this year. I'd love to see the overall numbers. We all think about what's happened recently, and this season. The amount of injuries that have surfaced. Maybe it was because of no preseason. Maybe there's something to the turf issue allegations, but a lot of those injuries, they were non-contact injuries. So I think there's something to the unique element of injuries this year. The OBJ one is proving to be, kind of two-sided. Number one, you think, oh, what a shame, Cleveland's 7-3. I mean, they haven't been, a legitimate threat like this, maybe since Belichick and Saban coached them in the 90s. But they're doing it without that transcendent stretch the field option. But the flip side of that is that might have made their passing game actually more sound and balanced, especially with somebody who's really just getting his feet under him like Baker Mayfield. Instead of having to feed Odell and always being conscious, am I getting him the ball enough? Am I doing enough with him? Now he can spread the field, balance it out, feed two elite running backs the ball as much as they do. So obviously you never want to see anybody get injured. And at the same time, you do notice when there isn't that larger-than-life personality on an offense demanding the attention, sometimes the offense actually becomes more sound, more balanced, and more dangerous, ironically.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar about OBJ. Obviously, you never want to see anyone get hurt, but I think it just shows how strong the Browns are getting and how they're developing as a team. Talking about Julian Edelman, been on the Patriots forever. I feel like we always see him getting banged up, and he always just comes back, and he's always just a clutch player for them, especially with when Brady was there. It's a little different with Cam, but, they're winning more games, and I think he'll be back and be a part of their offense soon.
Yeah, that man is a winner. He's just a tireless, restless competitor, winner, period. Love them or hate them, you got to respect Edelman and the legacy he's left behind. I do think there's not too much tread left on those tires. I think he's taken a lot of hits. He's taken on a lot of injuries. He could certainly still be a role player and push a team's culture over the edge into the difference between winning and losing. But I just don't know that he's going to be the difference maker on the field that he used to be.
Are there any other players that you think are really, their loss is going to be detrimental to a team's playoff chances? Anyone that specifically comes to your mind?
I'm not so sure that it's unique in the league to have an injury to overcome, to have a couple of injuries to overcome. But I think, what is unique is when you see something like what has happened in San Francisco. I'm not a San Francisco guy. I don't root for them. But, what they've endured is really extraordinary. But in general, I think we've hit upon a lot of the most pertinent injuries out there. And again, sadly, I'm not sure that we're done with them. The team that is healthy in December, those are the most dangerous ones. And we're talking about a lot of skill position players, a lot of visible people out there, who stays healthy on the O-line and who stays healthy on the D-line. That's who's dangerous in the playoffs.
Talking about whose comebacks we're excited to see, I think obviously mine will have to be Joe Burrow. I think it was just, his story is so great, and although it's, a bump in the chapter, I think his is going to be great to see what he does his second season, how he comes back even hungrier. And since the recovery time is 9 to 12 months, it's going to be pretty close to see if he makes the deadline to be ready for the beginning of the season. Do you have any thoughts on Joe Burrow or anyone else you're excited to see come back?
Well, sure. And when we talk about the timeline with ACLs, I think that it's not necessarily important for him to play game one. I think rushing guys back on a 9-month timeline or 10-month timeline instead of 11 or 12 can, make all the difference long term. If they could buy him some time early in the year and, put him in a position where he doesn't have to play until he's fully healthy, I think that makes a big difference. I think you see people rushed back sometimes, short-term gain, long-term loss. There's going to be a steady flow of people, making comebacks. I think Saquon is the one that I'm most interested to see. I think quarterbacks coming back from this are different than running backs coming back from this. So I'm most curious to see how that comes to be with Saquon. But a lot of really good young coaches in the league right now, changing cultures out there, building programs out there. Sadly, my Jets had a chance to hire all of these guys and didn't, and hired who they hired, and the reward will be an historic 0-16 season because of it. But even in a situation like that, you have to, pay attention to the way things work in this league. They're going to have the top pick in the draft, multiple first-round picks for the next couple of years because of the Adams trade. They can turn those into even more picks. Even that franchise can turn around rather quickly. So, when we talk about comebacks, we talk about individual players, we can talk about organizations as well. That's something that fascinates me, how quickly organizations can turn around their fate. I'm hoping the Jets are one of them.
Okay, and unrelated, but looking at the playoff picture, and since it was the main focus of our podcast, who do you think will get the bye week for the NFC and the AFC? My projections are probably Seahawks and Chiefs.
Well, I'd have to say Pittsburgh right now. Obviously, they have the inside track. I think their best football is ahead of them. I don't really think they have figured out their offense yet. It's kind of a good dilemma to have, 3 alpha receivers on the same team. Ben didn't play all of last year. I think there were a lot of adjustments that had to come into play there. And they have a different level of defense. So certainly, Kansas City is easy to point to. I mean, that's the team you just don't want to have to beat on any given Sunday. But the balance in Pittsburgh, as much as I hate to say it, the balance in Pittsburgh, I think, has them on the inside track to the bye. I think the best team, top to bottom in the NFC, is New Orleans. I think that defense is just starting to hit its stride. And that makes their balance dangerous. But without Drew Brees, I'm not sure. I'm not ready to pin my hopes on a team like Seattle, who can't play a lick of defense. Really, to me, have no business being in a championship discussion when you can't even play mediocre defense. But again, they can outscore you any given week. But I can't really put Seattle in that discussion. The game that's going on tonight, I think, the Rams, the Buccaneers are, just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, because of their ability to play defense in late season matchups.
Yeah, I have to agree. As much as I hate it with the Steelers, how well they're doing this season. And of course, I'd like to see the Saints finally get a good break in their playoff misery the past couple of years. And you make a lot of good points. And I think the one thing that we'll probably have to do another podcast on is just the NFC East in total and what's going on there, and how we both got a team in there, and how it's both the fact that they just have a chance to make the playoffs and play against some of these amazing teams is a whole nother discussion. But thank you for joining me again on this week.
Well, thank you for letting me be a part of the League of Their Own. I don't know if you've taken notice of the name, but League of Their Own is a takeoff on the Women's Professional Baseball League. I'm a big believer in women in broadcasting. I'm happy to be a part of your start in broadcasting.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your input. It's always good to have someone experienced with these teams, and especially such an avid NFL fan. We'll see you next time with another podcast.